Every religion has its mysteries. One of the closest guarded secrets of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has been its wealth.
They call themselves members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. To outsiders, they look clean, family-focused, and deeply devoted. Young men in white shirts knock on doors just like their Jehovah's Witness counterparts. Families gather every Sunday. Communities support each other through hard times. But behind that polished image, thousands of former members describe something very different. Secret temple rituals, financial secrecy, historical cover-ups, mental health struggles, and a system where asking the wrong question can quietly end your relationships and your sense of identity. So why are so many people now walking away from one of the fastest-growing religions of the 20th century? And what does the Mormon Church's future really look like? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, commonly called the Mormon Church, is one of the wealthiest and most organized religions on the planet. As of 2024, the church claims approximately 17.4 million members worldwide. It operates in over 180 countries and maintains more than 31,000 congregations, called wards and branches. At the top sits a small leadership structure. The First Presidency and the Quorum of the 12 Apostles make every major doctrinal and policy decision. Members are taught to follow their guidance as divine direction from God Himself. The church runs one of the largest missionary programs in the world. Young men between the ages of 18 and 25 are strongly encouraged to serve 2-year full-time missions. Young women may serve for 18 months. Missionaries pay for most of their own expenses, which can cost families thousands of dollars. Members are also expected to pay tithing, which is 10% of their income. This money flows directly into church accounts and funds buildings, programs, and other investments. For decades, many members assumed their tithing went primarily toward charitable work and missionary activity. That assumption was about to be challenged in a very serious way. In 2019, a whistleblower named David Nielsen, a former portfolio manager who worked for the church's investment arm, filed a formal complaint with the Internal Revenue Service. His claims shocked many members. Nielsen alleged that the church had accumulated an investment fund worth approximately $100 billion, later reported by various outlets as potentially exceeding that figure. He alleged that this money had not been used for charitable purposes as members might have expected, but was instead being held and invested. In February 2023, the Securities and Exchange Commission fined the church $5 million and fined a related entity $2 million. The SEC said the church had used 13 shell companies to hide the true size of its investment portfolio from public view. The church settled without admitting or denying wrongdoing. To many active members, the word tithing carried a sacred meaning. They sacrificed to pay it. Families went without vacations. Students skipped meals. Learning that their donations had quietly grown into one of the largest investment portfolios in the world while the church maintained a public image of modest service work was, for many, a breaking point. The church responded by saying it manages its finances responsibly, that reserves are kept for future needs, and that it does significant humanitarian work around the world. They pointed to disaster relief, clean water programs, and food assistance. But for thousands who were already asking questions, the financial revelations made those answers feel insufficient. For generations, members were taught a straightforward founding story. In 1820, a young man named Joseph Smith prayed in a grove of trees in upstate New York. God and Jesus Christ appeared to him. Later, an angel led him to golden plates buried in a hillside. He translated those plates through divine power and produced the Book of Mormon. The church grew from that foundation. But the actual historical record is far more complicated, and the church itself eventually acknowledged that. In 2013 and 2014, the church quietly published a series of essays on its official website called the Gospel Topics Essays. These essays addressed several difficult historical issues that many members had never been taught in Sunday school. Among the things these essays confirmed, Joseph Smith practiced polygamy, marrying between 30 and 40 women. Some of these wives were already married to other living men. One was just 14 years old when she was sealed to Smith, who was 37. Smith did not always translate the golden plates by looking at them directly. He often used a seer stone placed in a hat, pressing his face into the hat to read words that would appear. The church once taught that black members could not hold the priesthood or participate fully in temple ordinances. This policy lasted until 1978. The essay acknowledged that the reasons given by past leaders for this restriction were not God's will, but reflected the racial prejudice of the time. Early church history included accounts of multiple conflicting versions of the first vision, the foundational story of God appearing to Joseph Smith. The details changed across different tellings. Many lifelong members said they had never been told any of this. They described the experience of learning it as a crisis. The term used widely in Mormon culture is a faith crisis. It describes the moment when a member encounters historical or doctrinal information that directly contradicts what they were taught was the simple truth. For some, the essays felt like an honest step forward. For others, the quiet way the information was published, buried on a website without announcement or discussion in Sunday meetings, felt like another form of concealment. Few moments caused more immediate pain and departures than what became known as the November Policy of 2015. That year, the church quietly updated its internal handbook. Under the new policy, same-sex married couples were classified as apostates, a serious designation that could lead to formal church discipline. More controversially, the policy stated that children living with same-sex parents could not be baptized until they turned 18, at which point they would also have to disavow the practice of same-sex relationships. The reaction inside the church was immediate and emotional. Thousands of members resigned in organized public events. Parents of LGBTQ children described feeling that their families had been officially marked as spiritually dangerous. LGBTQ members themselves said the message was clear. They were not welcome as they were. The church reversed the policy in 2019, saying the change was a matter of inspiration and adjusting to circumstances. But for many who had already left, the damage was permanent. The question that stayed with them was simple. If this policy came from God in 2015, why did God change his mind 4 years later? Mental health organizations and researchers noted that LGBTQ youth in high-commitment religious environments face elevated risks of depression and suicidal ideation. In Utah, where the church holds significant cultural influence, conversations about youth mental health became impossible to separate from religious expectations. The Mormon temple is described by the church as the most sacred space on earth. Ordinances performed inside temples are considered essential for salvation. These include baptism for the dead, endowment ceremonies, and eternal marriage sealings. Until 1990, temple ceremonies included penalties, symbolic gestures that once included references to death as the cost of revealing sacred content. These were removed after members raised concerns. The church made the change without detailed public explanation. To enter a temple, members must receive a temple recommend, a card issued after an interview with local leaders. Questions in that interview covered tithing payment, belief in church leaders, sexual behavior, and association with groups that oppose the church. Members who cannot honestly answer these questions in the expected way lose access. For many members, the temple is a source of deep peace and meaning. For others, the requirement to keep ceremonies confidential combined with the access restrictions created a sense of pressure and exclusion. Non-member family and friends cannot attend temple weddings. In some cultures, this means a parent watches their child get married from a parking lot outside. The church has made some adjustments, allowing civil ceremonies to be performed before or after temple sealings in certain countries, but the restriction remains a source of real pain for many families. Like Jehovah's Witnesses, the Mormon Church built a world where information was managed carefully. Local leaders taught approved curriculum. Members were encouraged to avoid anti-Mormon material. The phrase used often was that critical information came from those who had been deceived or had an agenda. Then the internet arrived. Former members began sharing documents, photographs of original manuscripts, recordings, and personal stories. The CES letter, written by Jeremy Runnels in 2013 as a sincere question to a church educational system director, became one of the most widely read documents in this space. It listed historical, doctrinal, and scriptural concerns in plain language. The church never formally responded to it. Runnels was eventually disfellowshipped. Podcasts, YouTube channels, and private online communities gave people who were questioning a place to talk without fear. The Mormon Stories podcast, hosted by John Dalen, reached hundreds of thousands of listeners. Dalen was excommunicated in 2015. The pattern looked familiar to many observers. When individuals raised uncomfortable questions publicly, the institution responded with discipline rather than dialogue. That response accelerated departures rather than stopping them. Research from the Pew Research Center and independent analysts has shown that the church's real membership numbers are difficult to verify. The church counts members on its rolls until they formally resign or die. Estimates of active weekly attendance suggest the true number of practicing members may be significantly lower than the official 17 million figure. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is not collapsing. It has enormous financial resources, a powerful institutional structure, and millions of genuinely devoted members whose faith gives their lives meaning, community, and purpose. But the cracks are visible. Membership resignation services have processed tens of thousands of formal requests. The term PIMO, physically in, mentally out, describes members who attend services while privately no longer believing. They stay for family, for community, because leaving costs too much socially. The church continues to build temples at a historic pace. As of 2025, more than 350 temples are in operation, under construction, or announced. Leadership points to this expansion as evidence of growth and divine direction. Yet in the United States, sociologists note that younger generations are leaving organized religion at higher rates than any previous generation. The Mormon Church faces the same cultural headwinds as every other institution that demands high commitment and asks difficult questions to be set aside. The financial revelation, the historical essays, the LGBTQ policy reversal, the mental health conversations, and the constant flow of information online have created something the church has rarely faced before. A generation that was raised inside the faith loves parts of it deeply, but cannot stop asking questions that the institution has not yet learned how to answer honestly. This is not a story about whether Mormonism is true or false. That is a question every person must answer for themselves. This is a story about trust, about what happens when the gap between the image and institution presence and the reality its members experience grows too wide to ignore. For millions, the church remains a source of genuine love, family, and meaning. For thousands of others, the cost of staying became higher than the cost of leaving. And for a growing number of young people watching from the outside, the clean image no longer tells the whole story. The hardest chapters of this story may still be ahead, and only time will show whether the institution can adapt quickly enough to hold the next generation inside its walls.